Isn't there another way? He's just a boy! From this moment on, you will now be known as Sharkbait. Sharkbait! Welcome, brother Sharkbait.
Hazing is typically sort of ritualized behaviors to indoctrinate an individual into a group or organization. I think it typically has a negative connotation, although it doesn't necessarily have to. If you look at hazing in terms of fraternities, it's typically associated with negative kinds of behaviors. But there's a longer history of hazing.
Hazing has been an ongoing controversy that dates back to ancient times. But as time has progressed, hazing has evolved with the social norms of the times. The issue of hazing not only affects the participants, but society as a whole. However, the participants view hazing as a rite of passage rather than a cruel punishment. Let's take a look at how rituals of hazing have changed over the years.
Hazing was university endorsed up until about 50 years ago. Freshmen who came to Penn State were required to wear a dink, which is a hat that they had to wear for the first few weeks. Freshmen were not allowed to walk on the grass on campus. If freshmen were caught violating these things, upperclassmen could stop them in their tracks and force them to do, if they were male, they could do push-ups or other things. If they were female, they might be humiliated in other ways.
Following this period of university-sponsored hazing, fraternities and sororities began to implement their own rites of passage. During this time period, in the second half of the 20th century, hazing in fraternities was centered around physical struggles and activities that were mandatory for pledges to prove their loyalty to the group.
Take them down to this creek and throw them in. Meanwhile, it's the middle of winter. It was like freezing cold water. And you would have to go in, and then you'd have to beat them back to the fraternity house. If you didn't beat them back, then they would take you back down and throw you in again. They basically allow for an entire week. You are allowed to sleep literally a handful of hours. I'm talking 3-4 hours in a week. You're awake the entire week. They would physically do things to us, like hit us and stuff. You couldn't do that nowadays. You can't do that kind of stuff. And you have to come up with ways to still build that bond.
As social norms have changed and physical hazing has become less acceptable, the rites of passages in fraternities have become mostly time commitments and mental inconveniences rather than physical tasks.
But I think time's probably the most ridiculous thing. The amount of time you put into it. Nothing that we actually do, none of the actual actions. We don't get touched. We don't get, no one gets hit or anything. You don't have to do anything that I wouldn't tell my mom about or my grandma about.
Physical hazing has become less socially acceptable, and hazing rituals have become increasingly mild. So why does it remain a public controversy today? The effects of hazing have resulted in incidences gone wrong and suffering grains that have negatively impacted the reputation of the university.
Certainly it's still an issue, particularly with the coupling of hazing behaviors and alcohol consumption. The concern is that real permanent harm is done, and I don't think that can be under emphasizing. That's still a major problem.
When fraternities and sororities couple their hazing processes with alcohol consumption, it becomes a public issue because people are in danger and incidents gone wrong reflect poorly on the university. Additionally, pledges' grades tend to suffer throughout the pledging process.
My grades would definitely be better if I wasn't going through this process. I think that there's no doubt in that.
In reality, my grades were lower that semester.
These kinds of behaviors are part of becoming a member of that group, particularly when we talk about fraternities and sororities. And so to be the one to stand up and say, no, I don't want to do this, it's going to be a very difficult thing.
A lot of the things that we did that I think that some people might consider like hazing or whatever were things that, and there was a purpose to these things. And the main purpose was to build trust and camaraderie amongst especially the people in your class and people in the whole fraternity is in general. And when I talk to them, we're still friends. We still can relate to things. We still know about that person. Like I know things about that person specifically, but I know the way that person is totally. And we can relate, and that's what they call brotherhood. That's why you do those things.
I can deal with a semester of inconvenience and responsibilities for the lifelong connections I'm probably going to make. Some of these guys are going to be at my wedding. Some of these guys are just going to be my best friends for the rest of my life, and I can't really put a price tag on that, especially one that's only, a semester long, if that.
Within the fraternities, there is this history that's existed since the fraternity started, and so to end a tradition becomes a very difficult thing to do.
And it's been the same process for many, 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 many years. So I don't see myself just completely smashing any tradition because I feel like it's an inconvenience to whoever's recently pledging, because in all honesty, I went through it and I'm not an amazing person. There's other people that go through it that just regular people, and it's a lot of inconvenience, a lot of responsibilities, but you make it through it. So I don't see ever trying to break that tradition.
Fraternity, we had to learn like some Latin song. Gamma nostra condiat, obscurata non com. Veris vertes justus vas, omniscient notitia. Suave vera therapi, tu regina pura, o cama nostra condiat, obscurata non com.